Hi, and welcome back to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, Parenting Insights from Pediatrician Moms. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Today we are going to have another episode on screens, specifically screen use in the school-age child. And this time, this episode is going to focus on time, how to budget time, how to manage time, how much time should they be using screens.
Sounds good. We haven't talked about screens in a while. And of course, it's a much needed topic and there's so much to discuss. So let's dive in.
Welcome to the 10 Kids, 2 Docs podcast. Seasoned pediatricians and longtime friends, Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin have counseled thousands of parents and are raising 4 and 6 kids, respectively. Join these doctor moms as they incorporate fun and their combined wisdom and experience to share parenting insights for anyone looking for practical and trustworthy guidance. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
So we have already released one episode about screens in this age group, screens in the school-age child related to content, and how to choose and monitor the content that your child is watching. And if you haven't yet listened to that episode, I encourage you to go back and listen to that because it gives some overarching thoughts about screen use in general.
Yeah. You're going to find that these two episodes really dovetail with each other. But there's so much to talk about how practically you implement these strategies in your home. So we really needed to divide it out and talk about how we control content. And now we'll really talk about our philosophies on the amount of time children should have and how we control that time.
Yeah, so classically, in the past, we would ask in the well visit how much screen use the child is having. All screens included, both TV viewing, laptop, streaming service, and iPad or gaming with video gaming. And the classic guidelines for this age group is 2 hours a day, no more than 2 hours of screen use a day.
Yeah, I miss those days a little bit, Sylvia. I know that you can remember, and I know the history of it. It used to be that on those handouts that we give at the well child visit, it would say limit television time to 2 hours a day. And then it kind of evolved into limit television and video game time to 2 hours a day. And then the word screens came in, and it's just making the point that the bucket of things that we're trying to control and limit is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right. I had interaction with a patient this week talking about this. And one of the big questions the dad had for me was he had a lot of concerns about too much restriction. That once, they had like the opportunity to have screens, like they didn't know how to self-regulate. And he was
forbidden fruit.
Right. And he was seeking my advice how they as parents can introduce something that's so tempting like the screens.
Yes.
And in the context of teaching some self-regulation.
I can give you my advice on
so
that.
Let's hear. So what would you say to this dad, Vivian?
Okay.
Tell me your advice.
So first off, I think that's a very important question. And I will say, I think the reason for me that I have agreed to doing screens and the school-age child first is because in my mind, that's a time that is very black and white. Mm-hmm. I believe that in that school-age time, we're talking elementary age and down, not middle school, you have the freedom as a parent to do 0 screens at all if you want. Mm-hmm. I will never be convinced. I hate it when the schools say that for some reason your child needs to be introduced to technology so that they can learn to live in this technological world that we live in. At these ages, I fully believe children best learn from their natural environment, and that is all they need. Now, practically speaking, almost none of us can do that, right? Unless you're going to go, live homestead in an RV out in the wilderness.
Right.
Until your child is 10, it's really hard not to do any screens. If you have the power to do it, more power to you. Feel the freedom to do it. Your child's going to learn so much from their natural environment and their interpersonal interactions with real people.
I feel like for me, I actually, to answer this dad's question as a parent, I used time as the way to begin to teach some self-regulation and control with screens.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me about your techniques, your methods.
Yeah, so we did very little like TV, movie, streaming show watching. But when my children reached second grade, they had the privilege of playing like a video game. And we
Mhm.
had a Nintendo Wii.
We still have the Wii, although it's such a pain that to have to go find the discs at Game Over or GameStop. I wish that they still made them.
We still have our Wii as well. And the rules that we set up for the Wii were kind of related to this self-regulation in time. Obviously they didn't have to play the Wii for any type of educational purpose. It was
Right.
completely fun and a very family-friendly type gaming system, right?
Yeah.
So the rules that we set up in our house was that we allowed our children to have 100 minutes of video game time a week, which,
Mhm.
to a kid, that's like 100. That number is so big, right? Like the
Yeah, yeah,
100th
yeah.
day of school, 100 is so big. So they're
Yes.
like, wow, that's so much time, 100, right? But, in reality, 100 minutes isn't that long. And they had the choice of playing the Wii 100 minutes a week, but they could only play for 30 minutes a day. Okay. So we kind of set a time parameter to say, here are the rules. If we give you 100 minutes, but you can't play more than 30 minutes a day. So, as they started playing, if they were like, oh, I want to play Wii today, okay, 30 minutes. I want to play Wii tomorrow, 30 minutes. The next day, 30 minutes. Their time is almost done after 3 days. So it becomes something where they learn how to budget.
Yeah,
They have their rules, and then they
yeah,
will say like, "Oh, my friend's coming over for a play date on Saturday. I want to make sure I spend my 30 minutes then. So I have to save my time to play on Saturday. So I'm only going to play 10 minutes today." So whatever they decide, like I'm not telling them turn it on, turn it off, you're done. It's not me who's setting the time. I set the larger parameter and then they set the time day by day. And the way that we implemented this was kind of in a way to help them be mindful about budgeting their screen time,
yeah.
and planning ahead. And also we wound up getting like those old school kitchen timers. You can obviously use a phone now, but something they can see, and they would say, "I'm going to play 10 minutes." And then they would dial it into their kitchen timer, place it down, start playing, and when the timer went off, they would have to stop. It wouldn't be me coming down, nagging them, me saying, "Your time's up." It would be like, you know when your time is up and you initiate stopping. So this was kind of the way, and our rules were harsh. If you went over your time, then you lost the rest of your time for the week. But in general, they knew that when the timer went off, that's what they had budgeted, and they need to initiate their stopping themselves.
What I love about your method is that I do really see it's giving them the responsibility. It's also teaching them time management. I mean,
Mhm.
it's also kind of helpful in teaching them math. Like there's a lot of principles that are going into play in how you budget 100 minutes of time per week.
Mhm.
So I really like that. Okay. All right. I would never have been able to do that.
Why
so I
not? Why don't you think so?
well, I think we should. I think in the second half, I'll tell you what I did and why it's different from what you did. And as much as I love your method, I just don't think it's practical for me.
Sure. I can't wait to hear it.
Okay.
So, in the first half, I kind of spent time discussing how I used screens in the elementary school age and time to start teaching my children a little bit of self management and self control with screens. I want to hear what you did at this age group with your kids and the time they spent on screens.
Okay, so in general, I stated my philosophy at the beginning. It's that at those ages, there are no screens that are necessary. In the episode on travel with screens, I talked about how screens became really useful for travel, particularly with my one that was prone to crying while traveling. So that's a perfect use case. I used screens when I needed them. I also have, I have a couple with pretty significant ADHD, and I think that also adds a level of chaos
Sure.
beyond. So I've alluded to this before, but everything in my parenting is pretty geared around efficiency, right? I mean, I'm always cognizant of neurodevelopmental choices. In fact, I homeschooled for a decade. I'm very on top of that. But there's a lot of choices that I make about efficiency in my house. And I just know honestly that your method would be too parent time intensive for me.
Yes.
To try to
Yes.
keep track of everybody's time, to try to negotiate with them. I also know that I do have children in a different way than you would experience with yours, who would just fall apart when the timer would go off. I
Mhm,
mean,
mhm.
that level of self-control was not in there at those ages, and it would just be a disaster. So we pretty much had a no video game standard until after elementary school. They were just too addictive, right? But we were much more liberal with television time. Like I said, shared experience. It's not handheld. It's on the wall. It's away from you. Actually, I see when I read through the AAP stuff, they've kind of alluded to that too, that it's really hard to do hard and strict guidelines anymore because there are screens everywhere. So I was just very thoughtful day to day about, hey, I need you to be on a screen now, so let's turn on the screen. Or, you know what? No, I don't need you to be on a screen right now. Go outside, go read a book, go have. I also was very big in these ages of making sure at some point I was like, go have downtime, go have quiet time by yourself. I don't care if you're reading a book. I don't care if you're drawing. I don't care if you're journaling. Like, go do that. Your brain needs to learn how to be alone and quiet and engaged in activity without all of the noise of everything else. So my method was just much more like loosey goosey, like day to day. What do we need? There were seasons in my parenting with many young children where our schedule had to be so much more regimented. And then I might use the screen to implement, hey, every afternoon at 2:00, meet in the living room and we are going to turn on a movie, or every afternoon at 3 or whatever. And this was part of our routine. So there were times I also used the screen as routine, or just to give myself this knowledge of, I know I'm going to have a break from 2 to 3:30 to get stuff done, because they can all watch a movie during that time. So it very, very opposite of you. No set time, screens completely being used to my advantage, and much more like day by day, season by season. What do we do?
I want you to describe the time a little bit more. Was there something in your mind where when you put them on, you would say, okay, as a parent, I want to limit this screen use to being an hour or 2 hours? Was there a point where, or was it just flexible based on the needs of the family at that moment?
It was pretty flexible based on the needs of the family. I mean, it
Mhm,
was generally like, oh, okay, if there's been a movie that's on, then the screen goes off. Like, that's an hour and a half. That's
mhm,
that's more than enough time for
right.
everybody. If it's like, oh, let's watch an episode of Bluey, like, oh, okay, well, maybe we'll watch a second episode. There wasn't as hard and fast, like, oh, our dinner's not quite ready yet. Go ahead, watch another episode, kind
Mhm.
of thing.
No, Vivian, you're right. We really did do this very differently when our kids were in elementary school. But I think it shows the listeners that there's a lot of different ways that parents can choose to budget screen time in their kids in this age group, right? Do you have any other stories or thoughts about screens and time in this age group?
I have children, and I will say some of it is related to ADHD, where there is really not that level of self regulation that's kicked in. And any screen is incredibly addictive and tempting. And so when I think about limiting screen time in my home, and even in these ages, for some of my children, I actually have to hide the remotes, because they will figure out a way, if it's available at all, to find a way to have screen time. And
Mhm,
often it's in the middle of the night, right?
mhm,
So everything has to be locked down. There has to be zero access,
mhm,
locked up or hidden, or everything on lockdown or everything on downtime. Because if you have kids, like, you know what I'm talking about, they're going to find their way into the time if you slip up on that. That's a challenge as well, right?
mhm. That's a really good point. I just want to take a moment to review the American Academy of Pediatric statement and guidelines, which we kind of went into a little bit more detail for this age group in the screens and content, because a lot of their guidelines are actually based on content. So please listen to that episode if you want
Yeah.
to hear more. But the American Academy of Pediatrics refers people to the Common Sense Media webpage, which we've highlighted before in a previous episode. And in their comments, in one of their Q&As, they say, if you're worried about too much time on devices, this is how they recommend regulating time. They say to consider creating a schedule that works for you and your family, right? It includes limits on how long kids can use their devices, the kinds of devices that they can use, and the types of activities or programs they can choose, right? Secondly, they encourage parents to get the children's input. So the plan teaches critical thinking skills and self-regulation. And lastly, they ask you to find out what the children like to watch, to try to introduce new shows and apps for them, to try or plan a family movie night, to kind of make it a collaborative type of discovery process instead of like that brain rot that can sometimes happen. So the American Academy of Pediatrics no longer sets a set time limit for the school age child and how much screen time is used. Like they can say it can be tempting to want to set a number of hours of screen time that is safe or healthy to guide your family's technology use. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of evidence that demonstrates a benefit from specific screen time limitation guidelines. So they don't have any studies or thoughts of what that number is, and they just ask you to be conscientious and mindful as a parent.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And another thing that it makes me think of is I definitely feel like the easiest way to limit time is to just not have it available. So what you and I both described, you were using the Wii primarily. I was using the television primarily, no handheld device. We're going to talk about all of that when we do adolescents and preteens, because then we really do need to be training them. But I think we should probably acknowledge that none of our kids had cell phones in these age groups either. So,
right. And if I were to give some overarching take home general rules, which can seem obvious, I'm stating the obvious here, is first of all, when it comes to screen use, whatever you choose for your household, the children need to get the things that they need to get done first, right? This goes without saying. If you have homework that needs to get done that night, that should come first. If you have chores, sometimes people have evening activities with sports and clubs. All of these regular things in life need to take place first. And then if there's extra time, that seems to be an appropriate time where parents can set, oh, this might be an appropriate time for screen use. So when you're budgeting time, just kind of being mindful of that overarching advice is something that I give in the office as well.
Actually, yeah, I used that a lot too. I still do when I'm being asked for screen time. It's okay, these are your chores. You need to practice your instrument. Is your homework done? And go outside for a little bit or go have some downtime and then come back to me. And screens are addictive. It's magic. They're like, yep, I'll go do it. I'll go take out the trash right now. They want the time. I used to use that hack too on days where I was working and Eric might be working from home. So I had younger kids who were just in the house, and I would leave them a whiteboard with a checkbox of do this, do this, do this, do this. And then you can go ask dad for screen time, and everything would get done. So I love that hack too. I think that's a really important one to mention.
Right. And then any type of reasonable pre-negotiated time between you and your child, like either one show, one episode, one movie maybe, or some set video game time, if that's what you choose for your family, like some premeditated time, I think is a reasonable place to start when budgeting time for your family.
Yes. There's one other principle in this that I like to bring up with families, and that's that at these young ages, you're establishing a pattern for your child that as the parent, you are mindful and you are in control. You're the one that's determining content. You're the one that's determining time. As they get older, this is going to become more collaborative where you're having a discussion with them. But you are at these young ages putting this pattern in your mind that as the parent, I am the one that controls this. And this is going to continue until you are 18, right? Like this is not going to change. I am the one overseeing it and in control. So even at these young ages, we're establishing this pattern now of
Yeah.
our authority in the screen use.
And in general, I see the elementary school age group as a time where parents can show their children the right way of doing things, right? You still have enough control over their lives to show them this is how you get enough sleep at night. This is how we eat healthy. This is how we, monitor or self-regulate ourselves with screens. Like this is the opportunity during this age group to show them the right way of doing screens.
Yeah. Yes. That's a good point.
Yes. I do want to encourage people, if they haven't yet already, to check out the American Academy of Pediatric's webpage. They have a module that teach you how to come up with a family media plan, which does include time and how much time your children are using screens and what they're using. So it'll get everybody kind of thinking about screen use and how much time children should be using screens.
I think if I were to try to summarize this, the first thing I would point out is that you and I did our screen time in elementary ages very differently, but it was equally mindful for both of us, but it was very different. And I would say that both of those systems worked well, right? I also want to point out, I brought this up, there are just some kids that are more challenging, whether it's related to their level of addiction to the screen or attraction to the screen, or they're developing self-regulation that they don't have yet. And sometimes that requires more restriction or more thoughtfulness on the parent for how to really make sure you're protecting those kids from not having excessive screen time. I like all of the points that we discussed as far as using the screen to make sure that your children are doing other things that they need to be doing, like chores. In other words, that they're earning the time.
Yeah. And for me, using screens was an opportunity to start teaching some lessons on being mindful of screen use, budgeting screen use, and trying to begin to teach a little bit of self-control of how to turn off the screen when you're done. So good luck to all those parents deciding and making some rules.
Yeah, this has been a really interesting and thought-provoking discussion for me.
Yeah. This is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.